If at first you don't succeed, secondary succession of Point Pleasant Park in Nova Scotia, Canada after Hurricane Juan.
On September 29, 2003, Hurricane Juan made landfall in Halifax, Nova Scotia, causing extensive ecological damage. Point Pleasant Park, a 75-hectare forest that includes 39 kilometers of trails, was significantly affected. Post-hurricane, 75% of the park, described as an even-age, old-growth evergreen forest, was destroyed. An old-growth forest is described as a forest that has had the opportunity to develop without the presence of disturbances. Due to the forest being even-aged, all the trees were roughly the same height, enabling strong winds to go through gaps and uproot the trees. Years after the devastation, ecological changes such as species richness, diversity, and evenness were noticed. These changes are signs of secondary succession, which is defined as plants and animals recolonizing an ecosystem after a major disturbance. The park is of significance to the Mi'kmaq Nation as it was traditionally a gathering place known as Amugati, which means spiritual place or the place of spirits. The objective of this study is to identify changes in the overall forest community metric and how the densities of the dominant species did or did not change from 2004 to 2025. And this study considers two hypotheses. The null hypothesis predicts that the secondary succession has not produced any significant change in the forest community metric or in the densities of dominant species over time. And the alternate hypothesis predicts that secondary succession has significantly changed the forest community metric and densities of dominant species over time.
To decide which sites we would be investigating, we picked 6 20 by 20 meter plots throughout the park that were similar to the ones that have been used for the past 20 years. These sites also all showed high levels of disturbance after the hurricane. Next, tree density and species were recorded. Every living tree was tallied, and it was identified using either iNaturalist or an identification list. Next, tree diameter and ground flora were recorded. Tree diameter was measured similarly to these figures below at 4.5 feet above the ground using diameter tape, and ground flora was measured using 12 1 by 1 meter quadrats, which were thrown, and then percentage of flora was estimated, as well as the species was identified using iNaturalist. Finally, for data processing, all calculations followed formulas from the BIOL2060 laboratory manual. For each plot, we measured tree density, tree species density, total tree density, species richness, mean DBH, Shannon diversity, and Pleio's evenness. These were all calculated and put into a table to determine trends in secondary succession. Linear analysis was done to quantify changes over time and determine whether it is actually progressing towards a later successional stage.
Over the next 3 slides, we are going to discuss our results. For this question, the null hypothesis predicts that there will be no significant change in the forest community over time. The alternate hypothesis predicts that there will be a significant change in the forest community over time. Figure 1 shows a significant increase in total tree density over time with a p-value of 3.9 times 10 to the negative 13. Total tree density increased from 4.75 trees per 400 meters squared to 117.2 trees per 400 meters squared. This data proves that the forest is filling in after the significant disturbance of Hurricane Juan. Species richness and Shannon diversity also both rose significantly, with p-values of 2.6 times 10 to the negative 18 and 1.4 times 10 to the negative 8, respectively. This tells us that over time, more species have colonized in Point Pleasant Park. As the forest continues to move towards its climax community, we can predict that the total density will eventually plateau. As interspecific competition increases for light, water, and nutrients, trees will naturally self-thin. Due to this competition, we can predict that fewer trees will survive, but the ones that do will increase in size, increasing the average DBH over time. We will fail to reject the alternate hypothesis, as there was a significant change in the forest community over time.
For question 2, for both dominant species, the null hypothesis predicts that there will be no significant change in density over time, while the alternate hypothesis predicts that there will be significant change in dominant species density over time. With reference to Figure 2 shows a significant increase in p-value, a p-value of 0.004 in red spruce density over time. In 2004, it was the only dominant species present, but it was presented in low densities, as the number of trees per 400 meters squared at the sites was 1, 2, 3, and 7. By 2024, red spruce density had increased by number of trees per 400 meters squared was 0, 3, 21, 3, and 17 at the sites, reflecting the progress of secondary succession. Figure 3 shows a significant increase in p-value as the p-value is 0.0003 in red maple density over time. In 2004, it was completely absent from the community as the number of trees per 400 meters squared at the sites was 0, 0, 0, and 0. But by 2024, it had become the more dominant of the two species as the number of trees per 400 meters squared was 37, 12, 2, 59, and 48. Both dominant species are now present and have established themselves, with red maple being the more abundant of the two, despite not being present in the forest community at all in 2004. From 2004 to 2024, total density rose significantly as the number of trees per 400 meters squared was 147, 56, 104, 82, and 129 at the sites, reflecting the progress of secondary succession. The Shannon diversity values also rose from 0 to 1.39 in 2004, and in 2024 it rose from 0.81 to 1.86, indicating there was a low diversity in the early stages of the forest recovery, but there is now the presence of more than just one dominant species, which contributes to the overall diversity, both of the dominant species, red spruce and red maple. Increases in density reflects a more stable, structured community, and that the trees are growing towards maturity. Once they reach maturity, dominant species will reach a climax. Due to secondary succession, we can predict that as the forest continues to grow, dominant species density will level off, and there will be fewer fluctuations within the dominant species densities. We will fail to reject the null hypothesis as there is significant change in dominant species densities over time.
Our null hypothesis predicts that there would be no change in Shannon diversity index, whilst our alternative hypothesis predicts that there will be a significant change in Shannon diversity index over time at Point Pleasant. As you can see by the graph, there is a gradual but significant change, also shown by our R-squared value and our linear regression equation. This shows that there has been a recovery in the Shannon diversity since the hurricane of 2003. Now this increase likely reflects the successional processes, such as more species establishing a more structurally complex and sound ecosystem in the forest. This can lead to higher abundance and evenness, which are key drivers of a rising Shannon index. As the forest moves towards a climax community, the Shannon index will likely begin to level off as competition for light, nutrients, and space increases. Once the community reaches this equilibrium, diversity is expected to stabilize near the system's carrying capacity. Because of this, we fail to reject the alternative hypothesis, as there is and was a significant increase in the Shannon diversity index over time.
Based on the observed data, the Acadian forest in Point Pleasant Park is best described as being in a mid-successional stage. While total density, species richness, and Shannon diversity have all increased over time, the average DBH is still decreasing. This indicates that the canopy is not yet complete, meaning large, mature trees have not yet reestablished themselves in the community. As an urban park, Point Pleasant Park faces factors that influence recovery stage, such as soil compaction and the fragmented structure of the forest. Heavy foot traffic compacts soil, which can cause inadequate rooting, reducing roots' ability to thrive and grow. Tree species are regenerating rapidly, but individuals are not growing to larger sizes. Additionally, the forest's ability to grow a full canopy is compromised by trails throughout the forest and the removal of safety hazards such as fallen trees. This creates gaps, allowing more sunlight for seedlings trying to establish and grow. The red maple is considered a shade-intolerant species, so this weak canopy supports our results found in Figure 3. These two factors help explain why Point Pleasant Park is currently experiencing increasing total density but decreasing DBH, which is consistent with a mid-successional recovery stage. Two-eyed seeing is a principle highlighted by Mi'kmaq elder Albert Marshall, who describes it as combining the strengths of both Western and Indigenous knowledge and ways of knowing. The late Mi'kmaq spiritual leader, healer, and chief, Charles Labrador of Acadia First Nation once said, "Go into the forest. You see the birch, maple, pine? Look underground and all of those trees are holding hands. We as people have to do the same." Adopting two-eyed seeing helps us view Point Pleasant Park's recovery to a mature Acadian forest in a positive way. It combines objective data of recovery and spiritual knowledge, highlighting how we as humans must work together to preserve the land we live on, just as the species in Point Pleasant Park are working together to rebuild the beautiful forest that was once there. In conclusion, we will fail to reject our main alternate hypothesis that predicted that secondary succession has significantly changed the forest community metric and the densities of dominant species over time.
I would like to acknowledge that Point Pleasant Park is located in the ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I'd also love to thank our lab mates for peer reviewing our work, and of course, our lab instructor and TAs.
Finally, here is a list of references.